Welcome, my dear friends. Prepare your tea and coffee and make yourselves comfortable. Today I am going to tell you a story from ancient times. This is the story of the Sumerians, a civilization born in a fertile land embraced by rivers. Imagine that far away in ancient times you live in Mesopotamia, which lies between two great rivers. This land witnessed one of the greatest beginnings in human history. Together we will embark on a long and exciting journey from the founding of the Sumerians to their fall. At the beginning of this adventure, close your eyes and imagine yourself in the middle of the fertile land between the Euphrates and Tigris rivers. Here, the Sumerians were born. Cities, one of the greatest miracles of time, rose on this land. People began to live in larger and more complex communities than ever before. This story tells how simple villages one day grew into great city-states. When the Sumerians built their first cities, perhaps no one could have imagined that these small villages would one day have such a huge impact on world history. But it happened. Great cities such as Uruk, Lagash rose one by one, and each of them began to shine like a star. Now I will guide you on this exciting journey. I will describe the events in full detail, introduce the people, share with you what happened and what has happened. Perhaps you will find yourself in some of the events, while others will make you think deeply. Are you ready? Then, let's step into the glorious world of the Sumerians. Of course, my dear friends. Now, in order to understand the history of the Sumerians, we must first understand the land they lived in and the characteristics of this land. Sit down, relax, and close your eyes and imagine. Under the guidance of a sage, let us embark on a journey into the unique geography and climate of Mesopotamia. Mesopotamia. Isn't even its name like a poem? This word means the country between two rivers. This vast geography stretching between the Euphrates and Tigris has been the cradle of the oldest and greatest civilizations in history. The first great steps of human history were taken here. My friends, these two great rivers not only gave life to this land, but also shaped the history of humanity. Every year, these rivers overflowed and covered the surrounding lands with a fertile mud. These floods provided the fertile soil needed for agriculture. Imagine watching this great spectacle of nature every year. The rivers rise, overflow, and leave behind the precious mud that gives life to the land. This miraculous cycle ensured the fertility and wealth of Mesopotamia. People would sow their crops after these floods and reap bountiful harvests. This allowed the Sumerians to develop an economy based on agriculture. But Mesopotamia was not just a land of fertile soil. Geographically, it had large and flat areas. These plains allowed for the establishment of cities and large agricultural areas. But it was also a vulnerable region. Wars and invasions were the fate of these lands. As the Sumerians built their cities in the middle of these plains, they also had to develop defense strategies. The climate was another story. Mesopotamia's climate is hot and dry. Summers were scorching hot, while winters were mild. Rainfall was erratic. Managing water resources was therefore vital. The Sumerians built irrigation canals and dikes to irrigate their agricultural fields. Imagine living in a hot and arid climate and feeling every day how precious water is. This led the Sumerians to learn how to manage and utilize water. Therefore, their success in water management is an indication of how far they had come in agriculture and urbanization. These two great rivers formed the heart of Mesopotamia. The Euphrates and Tigris provided not only water and fertility, but also transportation and trade routes. These rivers connected cities and allowed trade to flourish. Goods were transported through these rivers and cultures and ideas spread through them. Thus, Mesopotamia became a center not only of agriculture, but also of trade and cultural interaction. Such was the land where the Sumerians lived. Fertile but harsh, hot but strategically important. The Sumerians made the most of the opportunities and challenges offered by these lands and built one of the greatest civilizations in history. Now, let's continue our journey through these ancient lands and discover together how the Sumerians built a great civilization. Ah, my dear friends, close your eyes and take yourself back to the depths of ancient times, to the days when the first city-states of the Sumerians were born. Now, together, we will witness how these cities were founded and how they grew and developed. In the fertile soil of Mesopotamia, thousands of years ago, one of the most important steps in human history was taken. The first city-states, Eridu, Uruk, and Ur, were founded here. These cities were the best examples of the Sumerians' far-sightedness and determination to establish civilization. Our first stop is Eridu. Ah, Eridu, one of the oldest cities of Mesopotamia. According to rumors, this city, founded by the god Enki, is known as one of the first settlements in human history. Eridu was built on the marshy banks of the Euphrates River. At that time, this land was covered with water and people were engaged in fishing and agriculture. In the center of Eridu was a large temple dedicated to Enki. This temple was not only a place of worship, but also the center of the city's social and economic life. People gathered here, traded and prayed to their gods. The houses and shops built around the temple formed the heart of the city. The inhabitants of Eridu prospered through agriculture and fishing. They dried and preserved the fish from the river and sold the produce from their fields in the market. Now we turn our eyes from Eridu to Uruk. Ah, Uruk, what a magnificent city. One of the first great cities of history. Uruk is known as the city of kings and heroes. It is believed that the great king Gilgamesh ruled here. The walls of Uruk were so high that even those who saw them from a distance were amazed. They protected the city from enemy attacks and at the same time symbolized the splendor of Uruk. In the center of Uruk was a large temple dedicated to Ishtar. This temple was used not only for religious ceremonies but also for social events. In the marketplace of Uruk, merchants exhibited their goods and the people met their daily needs here. Uruk was not only an economic center but also a cultural center. Here, literature and art developed, and the writing system was used for the first time. The cuneiform script of the Sumerians constituted the first written documents of history, and Uruk was a pioneer in this field. As you wandered through the crowded streets of Uruk, you could see artisans selling pottery, jewelry, and clothes in their shops. The city's educational institutions allowed young people to learn to read and write and to become the leaders of the future. And finally, Ur. Ah, Ur, the Pearl of Mesopotamia. Built on the banks of the Euphrates River on vast and fertile lands, Ur was famous for its wealth and splendor. Ur's greatest feature was its gigantic temple called the ziggurat. This temple attracted attention with its stepped structure rising towards the sky. The ziggurat was not only a place of worship, but also a center of astronomy and science. The streets of Ur were filled with the shops of rich merchants and artisans. Commercial life was very lively in the city. Ur was an important port city for maritime trade. Through the Euphrates River, goods were transported as far as the Mediterranean Sea and the Indian Ocean. It was possible to see the ships of foreign merchants in the harbor of Ur. These merchants would sell the goods they brought from distant lands in the Ur market. The people of Ur had prospered thanks to agriculture and trade. Exotic plants and trees were grown in the gardens of rich houses in the city. These gardens gave peace and happiness to its inhabitants. My dear friends, these three city-states were the Sumerians' first steps on the road to civilization. Eridu, Uruk, and Ur were not only settlements but also centers of culture, science, and trade. In these cities, people laid the foundations of a great civilization by working, producing, and sharing together. The story of the Sumerians began in the streets, temples, and markets of these cities. Now, let's continue our journey through the magical atmosphere of these ancient cities and step into the next era of Sumerian history. My dear friends, I will now take you on a journey into the origins of the Sumerians and the theories about how this ancient people came to Mesopotamia. Close your eyes and get ready to go back in time, thousands of years ago. Thousands of years ago, the fertile land of Mesopotamia was to be the birthplace of a great civilization. But how did the Sumerians come to these lands? The answer to this question has led to many theories among historians and archaeologists. To understand these theories, let us first examine who the Sumerians were and where they came from. The Sumerians called themselves the people of the land because the land they inhabited was located between the Euphrates and Tigris rivers, a fertile and wetland area in the south of Mesopotamia, in what is now Iraq. However, there are many theories about how the Sumerians came to this region. The most common of these is that the Sumerians were a people who migrated to Mesopotamia from outside. According to one theory, the Sumerians migrated from the east, from the mountainous regions of present-day Iran. This theory is supported by the fact that the Sumerian language is different from other Mesopotamian languages, and linguistic traces indicate that the Sumerians came from another region. Linguists have determined that Sumerian belongs to a language family that is completely independent of the other languages spoken in Mesopotamia. This is considered strong evidence that the Sumerians came from outside. Another theory suggests that the Sumerians may have migrated from Southeast Asia, perhaps from northern India or the steppes of Central Asia. This theory argues that the Sumerians already had an advanced agricultural and irrigation system when they arrived in Mesopotamia, and that these knowledge and techniques were brought from outside Mesopotamia. The Sumerians' knowledge of agricultural technologies, irrigation systems, and urban planning are considered as clues that they came from outside. Another interesting theory is that the Sumerians came to Mesopotamia by sea. This theory suggests that the Sumerians had maritime knowledge and reached Mesopotamia by sea via the Persian Gulf. The Sumerians' success in maritime trade and their connections with the sea are important evidence supporting this theory. In addition, some archaeological finds from ancient cities in southern Mesopotamia point to foreign influences coming by sea. All these theories offer different perspectives on the origin of the Sumerians, but one thing is certain: when the Sumerians arrived in Mesopotamia, they completely transformed the region. Their advanced agricultural techniques, urban planning, and irrigation systems allowed a great civilization to flourish in the fertile soil of Mesopotamia. Dear friends, talking about the origin of the Sumerians and their migration theories helps us understand how they came together and shaped Mesopotamia. This ancient people came to Mesopotamia, took root and flourished, and built one of the greatest civilizations in history. Now close your eyes and imagine how the Sumerians came to this fertile land, how they took their first steps. At that time, this land had not yet taken shape, but with the arrival of the Sumerians, everything began to change. Ah, my dear friends, I will now take you into the mysterious world of the early religious beliefs and temple economy of the Sumerians. Close your eyes and take a journey back to those ancient times when the Sumerians lived, when temples flourished and the people worshipped their gods. The Sumerians had a worldview that they believed was ruled by gods and goddesses. In their belief system, every natural phenomenon, every village and every city had a patron god or goddess. These gods played a major role in the daily lives of the Sumerians. The Sumerians' deep respect and fear for the gods formed the basis of their religious beliefs. The center of the religious life of the Sumerians were the great temples, the ziggurats. These temples were not only places of worship, but also centers of economic and social life. The temples amazed those who saw them with their gigantic structures and magnificent architecture. In the upper parts of the temples, there were sacred rooms where the gods resided and offerings were made to them. These temples also played an important role in the Sumerian economy and society. A large part of Sumerian agriculture, trade and craftsmanship was centered around temples. The temple economy formed the basis of Sumerian society. People offered goods and services to the temples in order to pay their debts to their gods and to receive favors from them. Temples also functioned as warehouses and trade centers. In early Sumerian society, temples were headed by a high priest or high priestess. These people both conducted religious ceremonies and supervised economic activities. The high priest or high priestess was considered the representative of the gods on earth and was highly respected. They were in charge of conveying the will of the gods to the people and presenting the needs of the people to the gods. The temple economy also had a profound impact on the Sumerian social structure. Temples also functioned as centers of social welfare. The poor and needy would receive aid from the temples and would live and work in them. This made temples the center of social life. The early religious beliefs of the Sumerians and the temple economy had a profound impact on their daily lives and social structure. The belief in the gods manifested itself in and guided every activity of the Sumerians. This belief system enabled Sumerian society to stay together and live in harmony. Dear friends, the deep and complex religious beliefs of the Sumerians shaped their way of life and social structure. Their deep reverence for their gods and their temple economy are key elements that explain the power and success of this ancient civilization. Now close your eyes and imagine the hymns, offerings and religious ceremonies echoing in the temples of the Sumerians. In those times, these sacred places were not only places of worship, but also the center of life. Ah, my dear friends, now I will take you back to Uruk, one of the first great Sumerian cities and one of the oldest cities in human history. Close your eyes and imagine yourself in the land of Uruk, in that glorious city where the ancient Sumerians came to life. The Uruk period dates back to the mid-4th millennium BC, when the first city-states of the Sumerian civilization began to be established. Uruk was one of the largest and most impressive cities of that period. The size of the city, its planning and architecture show how advanced the society of that time was. At the heart of Uruk was a large ziggurat, a temple complex. This temple was considered the home of the gods, and was the most important building in the city. The ziggurat was a huge structure that rose floor by floor, and each floor looked like steps leading up to the sky. On the top floor was the sacred chamber where the gods resided. This structure reflected the Sumerians' deep respect and faith in the gods. The city planning of Uruk was advanced. The city was built in a certain order and discipline. The city had wide avenues, streets, and squares. These streets connected different parts of the city and allowed the people to move freely. The streets led to the marketplaces, the heart of trade, and the shops of artisans. Around every corner were workshops and shops where the rhythm of daily life was set. Uruk was also the center of trade and crafts. Artisans, merchants, and farmers lived and worked together in the city. Artisans were engaged in various crafts such as pottery, weaving, and metalworking. Merchants brought goods from distant lands to increase Uruk's wealth and power and brought new cultures and ideas to the city. Farmers cultivated the fertile land around Uruk and fed the city. Uruk's urban planning also reflected its social structure. In the city, there was a clear distinction between rich and poor. The rich lived in large and ostentatious houses and lived a life of luxury. These houses had large courtyards, many rooms and gardens. The poor, on the other hand, lived in smaller and simpler houses and lived their daily lives in harsh conditions. However, both groups took part in the vibrant and dynamic social life of Uruk. Another striking feature of Uruk's urban planning was its irrigation systems. Since the city was located between the Tigris and Euphrates rivers, it needed plenty of water for agriculture. The Sumerians built canals and dams to use this water efficiently. These irrigation systems increased Uruk's agricultural production and helped feed the city's population. At the same time, these waterways were also used for trade and transportation, so Uruk became the heart of trade. The Uruk period also witnessed the birth of writing. Records made in the city's ziggurats and temples are considered the first written documents of the Sumerians. Written in cuneiform on clay tablets, these documents provide important information about Sumerian trade, law, religion, and daily life. The invention of writing played a major role in transmitting Uruk's historical and cultural heritage to future generations. My dear friends, the Uruk period is one of the most brilliant periods of Sumerian civilization. This city, with its architecture as well as its social and economic structure, shows how advanced the people of that period were. As you wander the streets of Uruk, you can hear the sound of artisans' hands working in their workshops, the hum of the marketplaces where merchants haggle, and the echoes of religious ceremonies around the ziggurats. To witness this glorious period of Uruk is to be a part of the human adventure throughout history. My dear friends, now I will take you into the fascinating world of the development of Sumerian language and writing. You will witness a miracle that first shone a light on the stage of history centuries ago and made the thoughts and stories of mankind permanent. Prepare yourself for a journey through the depths of time, in the wisdom-filled land of the Sumerians, where you will witness the first steps of writing. Once upon a time, in the fertile lands of Mesopotamia, a civilization called the Sumerians rose. One of the greatest achievements of this civilization was the development of a language and writing system. The Sumerians are known throughout history as the inventors of the first written systems, and this writing system has informed the development of many civilizations throughout history. The origins of the Sumerian language go back deep into time. While it was only a spoken language in the early period, It was eventually written down and used to carry the knowledge of the civilization into the future. Unlike other languages used at the time, the Sumerian language evolved into a writing system that enabled people to express their thoughts, knowledge, and emotions in a permanent way. The written form of the Sumerian language was made possible with the invention of cuneiform writing. This writing system initially emerged as a language expressed in symbols and pictures, but over time it developed into a more abstract and complex structure. Cuneiform takes its name from the fact that the writing was engraved on clay tablets using a nail head. This style of writing was a practical and effective way for the Sumerians to meet their need for communication and record keeping. At first, cuneiform started with very simple symbols. These symbols reflected the basic elements of daily life and the needs of trade. For example, one symbol represented a commodity and another symbol represented a quantity. Over time, however, these symbols became more complex and expressed a wider range of information. Symbols came to represent both sounds and meanings, making writing a more comprehensive and expressive system. This writing system was first used for practical needs such as commercial transactions, tax records, and agricultural production. Over time, however, this writing system was also used for literary and cultural purposes. These texts about the gods, kings, and daily life of the Sumerians are important as historical records and cultural heritage. Cuneiform texts contain Sumerian beliefs, legends, poetry, and legal documents. Another important development was the establishment of special schools for the teaching of cuneiform. These schools were intended to help young Sumerians learn the writing system and pass this knowledge on to future generations. This education included not only writing, but also the meaning and use of the script. Trained scribes were the ones who carried this knowledge into the future, while carrying out the official business of the cities and temples. One of the most important contributions of the Sumerian writing system is that it shows how written documents were made permanent throughout history. Clay tablets provided a writing material that remained intact over time, and these tablets carried the knowledge, laws, and cultural heritage of the Sumerians into the future. The writings on these tablets provide modern archaeologists and historians with valuable information about the daily lives, beliefs, and social structures of the Sumerians. My dear friends, the development of the Sumerian language and script is a success story that shines like a beacon of light in the depths of history. This writing system of the Sumerians is not only a means of communication, but also symbolizes the contribution of human history to knowledge, culture, and civilization. Each letter of cuneiform represents a legacy of wisdom and knowledge from the depths of the past. Now it is time to leave the treasures of knowledge of this ancient land. But remember that on this journey through the depths of history, we will continue to discover new stories and knowledge at every step. My dear friends, now I will tell you about the Sumerian city-state forms of government. Close your eyes and let's take a journey into the depths of history, into the magnificent streets, majestic temples, and administrative centers of Sumerian cities. This journey will offer a deep understanding of how civilizations took shape in the wisdom-filled atmosphere of ancient times. Once upon a time, in the fertile lands of Mesopotamia, the first city-states rose. These cities were the heart of Sumerian civilization, its cultural and administrative centers. Each city-state was endowed with its own unique structure and form of government. Let us step into the inner world of these city-states and explore in detail how their forms of governance functioned. To understand the governance of Sumerian city-states, it is important to recognize that each of these cities had its own unique structure and leadership. City-states existed as independent political units, and were often in constant competition and interaction with other surrounding city-states. The most prominent of these cities included settlements such as Eridu, Uruk, Lagash, and Kish. Each city-state was headed by a Lugal great king. This Lugal had both political and religious authority. However, this form of government reflected more of a local and regional administration rather than the authority of a centralized kingdom. The Lugal served as the city-state's war commander, legislator, and high priest. This title reflected both the Lugal's role in maintaining social order and his importance in religious rituals. Each city-state was headed by a Lugal great king. This Lugal had both political and religious authority. However, this form of government reflected more of a local and regional administration rather than the authority of a centralized kingdom. The Lugal served as the city-state's war commander, legislator, and high priest. This title reflected both the Lugal's role in maintaining social order and his importance in religious rituals. Next to the Lugal, there was an administrator who ran the administrative affairs of the city-state. Enis usually had less authority than kings, but they played a major role in the day-to-day administration of cities and the running of local affairs. This ruling class was responsible for collecting taxes, overseeing public projects, and administering justice in various parts of the cities. The form of government of the city-states can in fact be described as a theocratic monarchy. This refers to a form of government in which religious and political authority are intertwined. Temples were at the center of this understanding of government. Temples functioned as centers of both religious and economic activity. Lugal and Enlil were closely involved in the management of the temples and their religious rituals. The temples also housed large storehouses and treasuries, which were also responsible for collecting and managing the city's wealth. The governmental structures of city-states were usually supported by an assembly or council. These assemblies were composed of local rulers, priests, and important merchants and artists. This group would meet to discuss various city issues, make decisions, and maintain order in the city-state. This assembly structure of city-states played an important role in both governance and social decision-making processes. Another important feature of Sumerian city-state governance is their legal systems and law codes. In these city-states, laws were usually written in the form of rules and regulations and publicized among the people. These laws aimed at maintaining social order and regulating trade and economic activities. One of the most well-known law codes is that of Ur-Nammu. These laws were drafted to ensure justice and maintain social order, and were designed to ensure that kings and rulers ruled justly. The social and economic structure of each city-state also affected the form of government. There was constant interaction and competition between city-states, which ensured that forms of governance and strategies were constantly evolving. This dynamic between cities resulted in each city-state having a unique understanding of governance. My dear friends, understanding the governance patterns of Sumerian city-states is a big step in understanding how this ancient civilization organized and governed its societies. Each city-state had its own unique governance and social order, which increased their importance and influence on the stage of history. Now, in the light of this information, we can move on to our next chapter, which will take a more in-depth look at the social structure and cultural dynamics of the Sumerians. We continue our exploration into the depths of history, into the wisdom-filled world of the Sumerians. My dear friends, I will now take you deep into the early laws and legal systems of the Sumerians. Let us take a journey through the dusty pages of history to discover how justice was established and how social order was maintained. Close your eyes and let us step into the ancient streets of ancient Mesopotamia, into the shadows of temples, into this fascinating period when law was the rule of law. When the Sumerians lit the first sparks of civilization with fire, they had a carefully crafted legal system to ensure justice and order. In the fertile lands of Mesopotamia, ensuring justice and maintaining social order among city-states was of great importance. The legal systems developed by these ancient societies were designed both to ensure social order and to regulate relations between individuals. The foundations of the Sumerian legal system were laid with written laws. These laws were usually engraved on stones or clay tablets and publicized. This was a practice to ensure that the laws were known and practiced by everyone. These written documents played a major role in maintaining justice and order and allowed laws to be passed down from generation to generation. One of the best-known Sumerian law codes is the Code of Ur-Nammu. Ur-Nammu was a Sumerian king who ruled in the 21st century BC, and his laws are considered one of the oldest written legal systems in the ancient world. These laws were designed to maintain social order, punish crimes, and protect the rights of citizens. Ur-Nammu's laws included a wide range of regulations, from social relations to economic activities. Ur-Nammu's laws prescribed various punishments, depending on the types and seriousness of the crimes. For example, specific punishments were prescribed for crimes such as theft and robbery. These penalties were usually in the form of fines, restitution of property, or corporal punishment. The legal system's conception of justice included the protection of the rights of victims, as well as the punishment of criminals. However, Ur-Nammu's laws were not only about punishments. It also included rules and regulations to ensure a just order in society. For example, issues such as borrowing, inheritance, family relations, and trade were also regulated. These laws contributed to the maintenance of order by creating a legal system that addressed various areas of social life. Another important Sumerian legal document is the Laws of Lipit Ishtar. Lipit Ishtar is known as the king of the city of Uruk, and his laws, like the laws of Ur-Nammu, aim to ensure justice and maintain social order. The laws of Lipit Ishtar contain detailed regulations, especially on trade and economic relations. These laws laid down rules for the protection of ownership rights over goods and property, debt relations, and the settlement of trade disputes. One of the most remarkable aspects of the Sumerian legal system was the judicial system. In city-states, there were various judges and courts to administer justice. These judges were usually educated priests or socially respected people. Judges played an important role in applying the law and administering justice. In the courts, the defenses of criminals were heard and trials were conducted in accordance with the law. In the Sumerian legal system, the protection of social justice and order was at the forefront. Legislators had developed laws and regulations in order to ensure both justice and social peace. These laws not only protected the rights of individuals, but also aimed to ensure the general welfare and order of society. My dear friends, I will now take you back to the legendary rise of Sargon, a bright star on the stage of history, and the great changes that the Sumerians went through. Close your eyes and let us set off across the lands of ancient Mesopotamia to follow in the footsteps of a leader who once changed the course of history. For many years, the fertile lands of Mesopotamia had been dominated by city-states and kingdoms. The former glory of Eridu, Uruk, and Ur had changed many times with the passage of time. The most radical of these changes, however, was the legendary rise of Sargon, who emerged on the stage of history and built a great empire. Sargon was a king who ruled in the 24th century BC, and his name is remembered as the architect of one of the greatest conquests in Mesopotamian history. Sargon's life demonstrates his great skill not only as a warrior, but also as a strategist and administrator. But Sargon's journey begins with the steps from a child's imagination to the foundations of an empire. What is known about Sargon's origins is quite interesting. Sargon was born in Akkad, the capital of Mesopotamia. Sargon's father was a low-ranking soldier in the city, and his mother was a priestess. From these humble origins, Sargon set out at a young age to forge his own destiny by pursuing big dreams. Sargon was once king of a small city-state called Kish. But this small city was not enough for Sargon's grand vision. He seized the opportunities that fortune offered him and aimed to go beyond Kish. First, he conquered the city of Akkad and became its king, from which he began to build a new center of power. Sargon's rise to power and influence was made possible by his strategic acumen and military skills. One by one, Sargon conquered other city-states in Mesopotamia and built his expanding empire. During these conquests, the Sumerian city-states were also among Sargon's targets. Ancient cities such as Eridu, Uruk, and Ur came under the rule of this expanding empire. Sargon's conquests were not limited to military successes. They also led to social and cultural changes. The long-standing independence of the Sumerians was ended by the Akkadian Empire under Sargon's rule. Sargon recognized the cultural and religious values of the Sumerians in the lands he conquered and incorporated them into the Akkadian Empire. Sargon's empire represents a turning point in the history of Mesopotamia. With the establishment of the Akkadian Empire, the political structure of Mesopotamia underwent a major change. Under Sargon's rule, new forms of government and administrative arrangements settled in the region, radically affecting the social structure of Mesopotamia. The rise of Sargon heralded the beginning of a new era in Mesopotamia. The Akkadian Empire, together with the conquest of the Sumerian city-states, led to major changes in the political, cultural, and economic structure of the region. This empire took its place in history as one of the most important powers in the history of Mesopotamia. But Sargon's influence was not limited to military conquests. He also left a great mark on the political and cultural life of Mesopotamia. Under Sargon's rule, the diverse cultural and religious elements of Mesopotamia came together and shaped the identity of the empire. My dear friends, the rise of Sargon and the conquest of the Sumerians marked a major shift in history. It represents the moment when the old order of Mesopotamia came to an end and a new empire was born. Under Sargon's leadership, the political and cultural structure of Mesopotamia underwent a major transformation that shaped the future of the region. Dear friends, on our journey into the depths of the past, we will explore the cultural interaction between the Sumerians and the Akkadians. We will now focus on the confluence of these two great powers of history, how the fertile lands of Mesopotamia once came together, and the cultural riches this union brought. The relationship between the Sumerians and Akkadians presents a remarkable story with many different facets throughout history. These two ancient peoples of Mesopotamia interacted deeply, both in war and in peace. One of the most important results of these interactions was the radical changes and exchanges between the two cultures. Both civilizations played a major role on the stage of history, but learned a lot from each other in the process. The Sumerians, as the first great city-states of Mesopotamia, developed a culture and civilization of their own. Their civilization was characterized by a rich mythology, a complex social structure, and an advanced writing system. The Sumerians equipped their cities with great temples and complex water channels, and achieved great success in agriculture and trade. The social and cultural life of the Sumerians dominated the region for decades. But there was a major shift in history, and it came with the rise of the Akkadians. Led by Sargon, the Akkadians conquered the Sumerian city-states and took over Mesopotamia. This conquest was not only a military victory, but also led to cultural and social changes. In Mesopotamia under Akkadian rule, there was a remarkable cultural interaction between the two civilizations. The Akkadian adoption of Sumerian culture and traditions is one of the most obvious signs of this interaction. The Sumerian writing system, beliefs in gods and goddesses, literary works, and even social structures were accepted by the Akkadians, and these elements became part of Akkadian culture. The Akkadians developed a new writing system, adapting the complex Sumerian writing system to their own needs. This writing system facilitated bureaucratic procedures and the recording of trade in Mesopotamia. Sumerian mythology and religious rituals were also adopted by the Akkadians. The Akkadians maintained their respect for the gods and goddesses of the Sumerians and even integrated some of the names of gods and mythological stories into their own culture. For example, Anu, the chief god of the Sumerians, was also highly respected by the Akkadians and was included among the Akkadian gods. The worship rituals of the Sumerian gods also played an important role in the religious life of the Akkadians. This cultural interaction also left deep traces on the social structure of Mesopotamia. The administrative systems, social structure, and economic arrangements of the Sumerians were adopted by the Akkadians and shaped the way the region was governed. The Akkadian governmental structure was influenced by the complex bureaucratic arrangements of the Sumerians, and this interaction accelerated the evolution of Mesopotamia's administrative system. There was also a great cultural exchange in art and architecture. The art forms developed by the Sumerians were adopted by the Akkadians, and this enriched the artistic heritage of Mesopotamia. Remains found in temples and royal palaces clearly show traces of cultural exchange between these two civilizations. For example, the techniques of stone carving and sculpture developed by the Sumerians were used during the Akkadian period, enabling the evolution of these art forms. Dear friends, this cultural interaction between the Sumerians and Akkadians represents an important turning point in the history of Mesopotamia. This interaction is not only a merger of two civilizations, but also an indicator of how the cultural and social structure of a region is shaped. The interaction of the two cultures enriched Mesopotamia's historical heritage and contributed to the cultural diversity of the region. My dear friends, I will now take you deep into Mesopotamia and into the misty pages of history, on a fascinating journey that will explore the golden age of Ur-I and the impact of Ur-Nammu's reforms. Prepare your emotions, because this is a story of both the rebirth of a civilization and the innovations of a ruler that left a deep mark on the lives of his people. Once upon a time, in the fertile lands of Mesopotamia, the city of Ur witnessed a tremendous rebirth. This was an important era, known throughout history as the Ur-I period, which profoundly affected the cultural, social, and political structure of Mesopotamia. The most prominent character of this period is Ur-Nammu, a just ruler who brought great order and prosperity to his people. The Ur-I period is an era that lasted between 211–2004 BC and saw the reunification of Ur, one of the most powerful city-states of Mesopotamia. With Ur-Nammu's ascension to the throne, the city of Ur experienced a period of ascendancy and heralded the golden age of the Sumerians. Ur-Nammu's reforms during this period led to major changes that affected not only the city-state but the whole of Mesopotamia. Ur-Nammu's first and most important reform was the radical changes in the legal system. At the time, there were various local practices and customs for the administration of justice. But Ur-Nammu took a big step towards establishing a just legal system by bringing all these differences together. These reforms aimed to ensure that justice was equally available to all. The ruler created a comprehensive legal code to ensure that the laws were strictly and transparently enforced. This code aimed to solve many of the problems of everyday life and to prevent injustice. Ur-Nammu's legal code aimed to establish a structure in which justice would protect the rights of not only the royal family, but also the rights of every segment of the population. This code laid down clear rules on many issues, especially on property, debt, and family relations. One of these codes, known as the Laws of Ur-Nammu, is one of the first written legal documents aimed at ensuring justice for all. Ur-Nammu's laws introduced important changes to protect property rights, regulate debt, and ensure social justice. In addition to the written legal system, Ur-Nammu's reforms also covered the economic and social structure. The city of Ur became a major trade center, and significant progress was made in agriculture and industry during this period. Thanks to Ur-Nammu's reforms, trade routes were secured and infrastructure within the city was improved. These developments increased Ur's economic power and enabled the city-state to become the most important commercial and cultural center in the region. Ur-Nammu's government policies were aimed at raising the living standards of the people. Investments in social services, health and education increased the welfare of the people. The city of Ur became not only a commercial center but also a cultural and religious center during this period. Under the leadership of Ur-Nammu, great temples and palaces were built in the city. These structures reflected the rich cultural heritage and religious beliefs of the Sumerians. One of the most important achievements of the Ur-II period was the restructuring of the temple economy. Ur-Nammu reorganized the temples as administrative and economic centers. The temples became not only places where religious rituals were performed, but also centers where major economic activities were carried out. Taxes and donations collected under the control of the temples increased the economic power of the city-state and ensured the prosperity of the people. Ur-Nammu's reforms formed the cornerstones of the success of the Ur-II period and marked an important turning point in Mesopotamian history. These reforms contributed to the development of both the city of Ur and the whole of Mesopotamia, leaving an influential legacy throughout history. Dear friends, I will now take you on a journey through the ancient stones of Mesopotamia in search of a divine echo. We will step into the majestic and mystical world of the ziggurats. Close your eyes and get ready to trace back into the depths of history, to the ancient times when the ancient Sumerians built their divine temples. Let's step back in time to those days, full of grand structures and religious innovations. An echo from the depths of time reverberated through the fertile soil of Mesopotamia. It was the voice of the gods and their representatives on earth. The majestic structures of the ziggurats were the places where this voice echoed. Once upon a time, in this sacred land of Mesopotamia, each city-state built a magnificent ziggurat dedicated to its god. Ziggurats were considered the sacred dwellings of the gods on earth and were central to Sumerian religious life. The construction of a ziggurat was not just a matter of stacking stones on top of each other. These enormous structures were a marvel of meticulous engineering and carried all the sacred values of a faith, a culture, a civilization. Ziggurats were built as gigantic structures rising in steps, each one different from the next. In addition to functioning as a temple, these structures were also considered to be the representatives of divine beings on earth. The ziggurat of Ur was one of the most famous of these magnificent structures. Located in the center of the city-state of Ur, this ziggurat was built under the rule of Ur-Nammu as the seat of the gods on earth. The construction of the ziggurat reflected not only engineering skill but also a deep religious faith. Each step had a purpose and each floor symbolized a closer approach to the height, might and place of the gods. Each floor of the ziggurat symbolized a journey to get closer to these gods. The stones used in the construction of the ziggurats were sometimes brought from local quarries and sometimes from distant regions. These stones were sometimes cut into huge blocks and required a great deal of labor and organization to transport them, taking a long time to complete the structure. All the energy and resources of the people were mobilized to build these magnificent structures. The workers, priests and artists who placed the stones carefully placed each stone of the ziggurat in its place for this sacred space, which they considered to be the throne of the gods. The construction of the ziggurats was also full of religious innovations. They were not only places dedicated to the gods, but also the center of the religious rituals and ceremonies of the people. On the top floor of the temples were the sanctuaries, the closest to the presence of the gods. On these high floors, priests and priestesses performed rituals that were believed to communicate directly with the gods. While these rituals expressed the people's devotion to their gods, they also played an important role in maintaining social unity and order. During this period, religious innovations also emerged with the construction of ziggurats. The sacred areas around the temples became the center of religious ceremonies and rituals. The materials, decorations, and works of art used in the construction of the ziggurats not only reflected the greatness of the gods, but also expressed the beliefs and culture of the people. Temples were more than just buildings, they were symbols of a society's beliefs and cultural values. The areas around the ziggurats were organized as religious ceremonies and festival grounds. These areas were sacred places where people gathered, rituals were performed, and offerings were made to the gods. These ceremonies had become part of the daily life of the people and were important events that expressed the religious commitment of the community. Dear friends, let us take another step into the depths of history. Among the majestic cities and temples of ancient Mesopotamia, I will take you to the story of the rise of the Amorites and the fall of the Sumerians, the story of how a once great civilization was destroyed and how a new power was born in its wake. Close your eyes and let us journey together through this sad but inspiring period of our history. In the dusty pages of time, a civilization once shone in the fertile lands of Mesopotamia under the rule of the Sumerians. However, just as every civilization has a lifespan, so did the Sumerians. The collapse of this glorious civilization coincided with the rise of a new power on the stage of history, the Amorites. The Amorites were a nomadic people from western Mesopotamia. When these nomadic people arrived to shake the sovereignty of the established city-states, the gates of the Sumerian cities would be thrown wide open. At first, the Amorites were known as small groups of nomads, but over time they became one of the most important power centers in Mesopotamia. The Amorite migration to Mesopotamia dates back to around 2000 BC. During this period, the Amorites began to gain power, especially in city-states such as Babylon. Babylon became one of the most important centers of the Amoritheians. As the Amoritians settled down, the city grew immensely and began to threaten the dominance of the Sumerians. This rise of Babylon caused the Sumerians to lose their supremacy in the region. The decline of the Sumerians was not limited to external factors. Internal problems and administrative crises accelerated the downfall of this ancient civilization. Civil wars between Sumerian city-states, economic difficulties, and social turmoil began to shake the foundations of the civilization. The Sumerians struggled to cope with these internal and external struggles, which continued for many years. The Sumerians, once a great military power and a well-developed urban structure, became vulnerable to the growing power of the Amoritheians. The Amoritic military skills and strategic moves allowed them to conquer Sumerian cities one by one. These conquests led to the loss of Sumerian territory and the end of their rule. However, the rise of the Amorites brought not only a change of sovereignty, but also significant changes in the cultural and political structure of Mesopotamia. The Amorites inherited the legacy of the Sumerians, but they also brought their own cultural and administrative sensibilities to the region. Babylon became a major cultural and economic center under Amoritic rule. In this new era, the Amorites emerged as a major power on the historical stage of Mesopotamia. The Amorite rule also allowed the preservation of the Sumerian heritage and cultural values. The written documents, temples, and cultural heritage of the Sumerians were adopted and developed by the Amorites. Thus, the traces left by the Sumerians in history continued to live on under the Amorite rule. This cultural interaction further enriched this transitional period in Mesopotamia's history. My dear friends, in this peaceful corner of history, I invite you once again to trace the traces of Sumerian culture into the depths of the past. Together we will discover how the impressive culture of the Sumerians left deep traces on the Babylonian and Assyrian civilizations, how it shaped the lives of these great civilizations, and how these lasting influences on the stage of history came to be. The Sumerian civilization, which once shone in the green lands of Mesopotamia, shone like a star in the depths of history. The interesting and complex culture of the Sumerians left its mark not only on the life of their time, but also on the civilizations that came after them. The effects of this immense culture left deep traces in the history of powerful civilizations, especially Babylon and Assyria. First, let's take a look at Babylon. Babylon had made great progress under the Amorite rule, but this progress was shaped by the inheritance of the Sumerians. The Sumerian writing system became one of the cornerstones of Babylon's cultural and administrative structure. The cuneiform script developed by the Sumerians was widely used in Babylonia and played a critical role in recording scientific and literary works. The text written on Babylonian tablets often contained quotations from the ancient Sumerian written documents. In this way, the literary and scientific heritage of the Sumerians was preserved in Babylon's cultural memory. The religious beliefs and temple culture of the Sumerians also had a great influence on Babylonia. Sumerian beliefs determined the role of the gods in the celestial world. These beliefs were adopted in Babylonia and played a major role in the construction of temples and rituals. Babylon's magnificent temples, similar to the Sumerian temples, were overflowing with rituals and offerings to the gods. Babylon, the capital of Babylonia, is famous for the great temples built for the god Marduk, and the plans of these temples were influenced by Sumerian temple architecture. Now, let us turn our eyes to Assyria. Assyria was a powerful civilization that dominated the north of Mesopotamia, and it adopted the Sumerian influences with great care. Assyria's administrative structure largely mirrored the Sumerian model of city-states. Sumerian city-states shaped the governance structure and administrative system of Assyria's major cities. Assyria's kings took the Sumerian concept of territorial government and built their own empires. This approach brought a complex bureaucratic structure and a strong central administration to Assyria's administrative system. The military strategies of the Sumerians also had a great impact on Assyria. The Sumerians had achieved military success by improving their war tools and techniques. Assyria adopted these military techniques and strategies and became a powerful military power. Assyria's army used Sumerian warfare tactics to establish a vast dominance in various parts of Mesopotamia. The art and cultural values of the Sumerians also had an impact on Babylon and Assyria. Especially Sumerian artistic productions and sculpture techniques were a great source of inspiration for Babylonian and Assyrian art. Sumerian statues of gods and goddesses were repeated in the temples and palaces of Babylon and Assyria. These works of art not only preserved the cultural heritage of Mesopotamia, but also inspired new art movements that developed this heritage. My dear friends, we have come to the end of this tremendous journey from the depths of time until today. Every detail we have discovered about the history and culture of the Sumerian civilization that emerged from this ancient land of Mesopotamia has once again revealed the richness and depth of this great civilization. For centuries, the Sumerians laid the foundation stones not only for their own era, but also for the civilizations that followed. The city-states they founded, the laws they wrote, and the works of art they created bear the traces of one of the most brilliant periods in human history. Everything from the calendar they created by studying the stars of the sky to the splendor of their gods shows how deep knowledge and understanding the Sumerians possessed. Today we have explored this rich legacy of the Sumerians, looking in detail at key moments in their history, cultural influences and social structures. Each city-state, each god, and each work of art has helped us understand the world of the Sumerians and appreciate their role in history. This research, which we have conducted to illuminate this important part of our history, this great civilization that lived hundreds of years ago, offers us perhaps the most important keys to the pages of history. As one of the civilizations that took the first steps in human history, the Sumerians have left us not only an understanding of the past, but also important lessons for the future. In closing, we need to remember perhaps the most important thing: history is not only the chronological sequence of past events, but also the collective memory of humanity. The Sumerians formed one of the cornerstones of this memory, and they shared this legacy with us today. By preserving and respecting this legacy, we must continue to learn from the past and shape the future. Dear audience, thank you all for joining me on this long and profound journey. It is a privilege for all of us to follow these ancient traces of the past, to go to the roots of our history and to share this knowledge. I hope this video has given you a deeper understanding and appreciation of the vast world of the Sumerians, and that it has brought you both knowledge and peace. I look forward to meeting you in the next video on another page of our history. Until then, continue to feel lost in these fascinating stories of history, because getting lost in the depths of the past is one of the most beautiful ways to shape the future. Goodbye, my dear friends. See you in our next videos, and have a peaceful and history-filled day.